Hi, this is Zibby Owens, and you're listening to Totally Booked with Zibby, formerly Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. In my daily show, I interview today's latest best-selling, buzziest, or underrated authors and story creators whose work I think is worth your time. As a bookstore owner, publisher, author, and obviously podcaster, I get a comprehensive look at everything that's coming out and spend my time curating the best books so you don't have to. Stay in the know, get insider insights, and connect with guests like I do every single day. For more information, go to zibbymedia.com and follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens. Tess Sanchez is the author of We've Decided to Go in a Different Direction essays. Tess Sanchez has spent 20 years in the entertainment industry as a casting director. We've Decided to Go in a Different Direction is her debut book. She resides in Los Angeles with her husband, actor Max Greenfield, who has also been on this podcast for his children's book, and their 2 children. Welcome, Tess. Thank you so much for coming on Totally Booked with Zibby to discuss We've Decided to Go in a Different Direction essays.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Tell listeners, please, what your book is about.
My book is about sort of a 2-year period of my life in which I experienced and dealt with a lot of what I like to call in the book painful favors, which are some challenges, unexpected challenges that ultimately were hard, but ended up being probably, interesting and good pivots in my life.
Do you really look back and feel like that? I mean, I know there was so much in your book about, what happens when you are in a career that you're really proud of and things go off the rails and you just have a hard time sort of even recontextualizing your identity after so long.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what the book is about is, me sort of questioning why so much of myself was defined by my job and my career and the other roles in my life really being secondary to, this like purpose, this driving purpose that I really felt so passionate about. And yeah, when that goes away, it really did make me look at all of the relationships in my life, and they were all sort of seen through this prism of I'm a career woman and I have, this really big life outside of my family and outside of my children and outside of my husband that I found so fulfilling. And so there's a point in the book where I kind of look at my kids and say like, oh, hello, nice to meet you. I haven't spent this much time with you before. So yeah, I think, it's been, a time of sort of self-reflection and in doing that, I had to sort of go back to the beginning of building my career and sort of how I got there. And that's why I do sort of a look back on my early casting days and getting to the place of why this career had meant so much to me over 20 years.
And it all started at BCBG.
Yeah, that's right. I love your shoes.
And by the way, I was living like right above Sunset Plaza in 1998 to 2000. And I remember going into that BCBG and like getting—
Did you? Oh my God.
Yeah. For like some big party I had.
Oh my God. I probably helped you.
Yeah, we probably crossed paths because I walked by. I thought it was the closest to New York that I could like walk around and—
Oh yeah, for sure. That was a hot strip back in the day.
It was really fun. It was really fun. But, throughout everything that's happened in your life, you have been very driven and you know what you want and you're open to just throwing yourself in and being like, yes, I'll be an intern. Yes, I'll try this. Like, yes, like you wrote this one note to a potential boss saying like, I might not have as much experience, but I'm going to work really, really hard. And he literally was like, I get a good feeling about you. Come on board. And I feel like that's such an important lesson, especially as like the millennials are in the job force and, they're
so true. It's like the one thing that I try to instill in my own kids is just like this sense of it's okay to take risks and it's okay to put yourself out there, even if it feels scary and uncomfortable. It's how movement happens in your life. And I always say to Max, my husband, I'm like, you were born with like a lot of just like beautiful gifts. Like you didn't have to try very hard for some of the things that you were born able to do. I did not have an apparent gift from God. So my gift was my drive. And I found out very young that I was going to have to be the force in my life in order to make things happen. And yeah, I think like that drive, I think is just innate. I mean, it certainly is, started with my father and my mom who basically were very independent when I was growing up and had their own lives and they were, not particularly into like facilitating opportunity for me. I knew I had to do that myself.
Interesting. How does that go over when you say that to your husband? Like, you were just born this way.
I know. I'm like, you haven't worked hard. No, I'm just kidding. He has worked hard. And certainly, he had 10 years of auditioning before he had a real break, which is, amazing and also really hard. But I mean, I actually do remember meeting him and being like, oh, like, I guess things just kind of come easy for you. As I'm like clawing my way.
I mean, I think it just speaks to all these different assumptions we make like so quickly about people, right? And now you've been married for like so long. And, what does it mean? Like, no one likes to, just so anyway, whatever. I could go down a whole rabbit hole here, but oh my gosh, I won't pry apart your marriage. Well, anyway, your drive ends up getting you all these great things. You meet so many stars as they're on their way up, and you learn from the best to identify talent and that certain something that will make someone shine. And at the beginning, you're so funny being like, well, really? Like, why? Until you realize that you have that gift yourself, right? You can figure it out.
Right. And I think it is by osmosis of the amazing people that I've worked with. And, a lot of like, I often tell actors like the best thing that you could do is to spend one pilot season working as an intern in a casting office, because it gives you such perspective on actors when you see them coming in and auditioning and just what to do, what not to do, who really stands out to you, who's doing something different but in a good way, and who's doing something different but in a bad way, and how all that translates. But it's such an incredible like learning experience. And I had incredible mentors that were like, no, this is what makes this person special, and this is how they shine. And it took years to hone that, but ultimately I think I got there.
So when you look back and you think about the different directions that your life has taken you in, like, where did you actually think it was going?
Oh, I thought I would be sort of carried out on a stretcher from my last job. I thought I was going to be in that job forever. And I would have been. And so I do think that, life happens the way it's supposed to. And the universe knew that I needed a little kick in order to leave what felt like a very comfortable yet fulfilling situation. I knew I was good at my job, and I knew I was confident in my skill set. And, maybe that was like somebody saying, hey, you're not done yet evolving as a human being. You
Mm-hmm.
need to develop another skill set. You need to feel uncomfortable in change to really become more evolved as like a full human being.
Well, I love when I mean, I don't love it. It was really sad, but you just keep repeating like, this is how my story ends. Like, this is how my story ends.
Yes.
And you're in such shock that your husband like puts his face in the Zoom and was like, this is over now, and just like closes it down.
Yeah, it's still so vivid in my mind. Have you ever been blindsided like that before?
Yeah. Things happen all the time, right?
Okay.
Of
Yeah,
course. And I think part of what's hard is that you've already planned a future in a certain way, right?
for
And then
sure.
you have to go back and you have to change all of those sort of plans. Like, you have just like, you're
Yeah,
not just losing the present, you're losing all that potential future.
right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I definitely felt like, initially when it happened, like I was at a bit of a dead end. I
Mhm.
was like, this is over for me. And I really love to like wallow in that. for, 6 months before I started to, get off my butt and, started creatively just generating again. And I think I mentioned in the book, like I was like, every other day I was coming up with like a new business idea. And, that was like an interesting thing to learn about myself. It was like, I can't sit still. And so I'm like, I'm going to do, I'm going to just do people's dinner parties and just do, tablescapes, or I'm going to have a cocktail line. Like, I mean, I was literally like taking things like 3/4 of the way down the field with like these ideas. And then I was like, I mean, what I can't, I mean, I'm not going to get a liquor license and, produce alcohol. Like, so, but, it was all part of this journey. And part of that was, in real time, writing some of this stuff down and not really knowing where this was going. And ultimately it became a book, which, still surprises me.
I know, it's so exciting. And by the way, my husband and I, for a while, were sitting at the bar at most restaurants because I don't like to wait for tables. So if there's a seat available,
I love a good bar meal.
Right.
Yeah.
And so finally we were like, let's launch like a his and hers tequila box set. And I'm like, how would we do this? What would the bottle look like? We went down this whole rabbit hole too. So
yeah, that's very relatable.
So I get it. I totally get it. Tell me about the process of writing the book and even like the editing process. How much did things change from the beginning? How much did it change from what you thought it would be when you first started writing it to even when you finished your first draft?
Yeah. So, you and I met early on in the pitch process, but before that, the real truth is I was literally following my husband around, telling him, like asking him these big life questions, like, well, why am I not good enough for that? And like, what should I do next? And he said to me, please, I'm begging you, go hire a professional sounding board, get a therapist. I can't do this anymore. I don't have the answers that you're looking for. But I was like, but why? But why? And so I did. I went to therapy, and part of that process, as I was in the middle, like literally in the middle of this, of just trying to figure out how I got here and what happened, this therapist was like, you got to write some of this stuff down. Like, it's just really going to be helpful to you to like relive these things kind of on paper. And so that's how it really started, is like, it was kind of an assignment. And then, in writing sort of like the present day stuff, which was like about my dad and the loss of a job and having my full identity crisis, like I mentioned earlier, I ended up looking back a little bit, and then it all started to sort of, take on a life of its own. And when I finished writing, I was like, oh, this is like, oh, there's an arc here. This is like this is a story. And I certainly, when my dad passed away, it really, and I found all the letters that I had written him, it really felt like the period at the end of a sentence. Like I was like, oh, like this is all kind of, this was meant to be this journey. And so, that part, I had written probably 80% of the book. And then when I got to, meet Andy, and I got to meet you and a couple other people, and ultimately Simon and Schuster, they basically said, like, this is too sad. Like, you need to add some like humor to this because it's just too sad of a read. And I was like, understood. And so I went back, and I was like, I was actually in a pretty good place at that point to like start to see some humor in these things. And, it's like, what is the definition of comedy? It's like tragedy plus time. And I was just moving far enough away to see how absolutely absurd, and manic I had sort of been in this process of like, I want self-discovery, and being able to like write that and infuse, comedy into some of the sad stuff, like when I'm looking for a retirement place for my parents, and like really like it was so depressing, but I was able to go back and sort of like find ways to infuse like my own brand of like cynicism and humor and irony in those. And so, that a lot of the comedy stuff came later. And that was part of like sort of the editing of like you can't, as a first time writer, I didn't have perspective because I was just sort of like stream of consciousness, like writing down these events that were traumatic. And it was really helpful to hear from my editor, like, this is really good, but to make this a full story where you can get, humor and heart and sadness and tears and all those things, like, here's what you need to go back and do. And that was, because of the timing, that was actually, the fun assignment part of like, how can I make this funny? Yeah. And I got to pull, like, I went back and I pitched during a lunch. I was like, I did DM Britney Spears. I don't know if that's normal or not. And like the fork was like, you did what? It's like, write about that, please. Nuts, and then I realized that just sort of it fit into, sort of it kind of, fit into casting and like how I'm just like a busybody and meddling into things. And it really became like, oh, this is part of the story. This is part of who I am. So, yeah, that was fun.
And what about coping with your dad's aphasia, which that's hard to make super funny, right? That's like a real life
And it was
heavy
one
event.
that they said, God, you've got to like figure out. And I think I pushed back on that initially of just being like, there is nothing fucking funny about this. This is just really awful.
Yep.
And, it's like all of this was kind of coming to be randomly when like the word aphasia was coming out into like the world because of Bruce Willis. And I just was like, the idea of like losing the ability to speak is just like so dark and such a death. And like ultimately, when it's combined with Alzheimer's, where you lose the ability to read and write, and it's devastating. And that part of the book is just very honest, and with my mom and having her process, like watching her try to process this and also try to also pretend like it wasn't really happening, which I was like, okay, I guess everybody has their own, methods of coping, but it was hard to watch for sure.
I'm so sorry. Well, you wrote about it beautifully, and I'm just so sorry that you had to go through that. And same for him and your mom and everyone. So,
yeah.
So you have this big, exciting launch coming. I've been seeing all the visuals of your upcoming events and all of that. What are you looking forward to about touring for the book and all of that?
Well, I'm most excited about the book being out in the world and like people having it just like I haven't given it to friends and family. I've really sort of kept it close. And like literally, I am just now having it be part of the world and hearing people, like getting texts from people that are like, oh my God, this is what resonated with me. Like that's the most exciting because it is such a solitary experience, as you know, from writing your books, that, you're sort of in this solitary experience and then you're like, and here's the gift, or here's what I'm giving you. And then you actually get to talk to people about this very singular experience. And that's really exciting to me. Like, I'm really excited about that. And yeah, just like I'm excited to talk about it and have exchanges and yeah, I'm excited to come and visit you.
Yay!
At Zibby's Books. That's going to be great.
I can't wait. I'm so excited you're coming. That's awesome. Really.
Yeah.
Really great. What advice do you have for aspiring authors now that you are an author?
Oh, wow. I'm still getting used to that. But I think, writing your own story, is really can be very therapeutic, and try not to judge it too much. Just try to do it. And I think the most like sort of meaningful thing that I experienced was when you're not writing it trying to please other people, you're just writing it for yourself. It's a different experience. And I think the same goes for like promoting a book is just sort of like, you know, you can't try to, you know, have it be for other people. You just have to sort of understand that this is your journey, and like you're going to, it shouldn't matter what the outside is thinking, you know, just, you know, stay present to what you're doing. And, you know, I mean, I think everyone should have an experience of writing their own book. I really do. And I think I never set out to write a book. But as you know, like I don't do things halfway. So like, I just was like, well, now I got to finish this, and I got to sell this, you know? And so I kind of feel like I like woke up one day and I'm like now on a Zoom with Zibby Owens, and I'm like, wait a minute. So I actually did, like, I went all the way.
You went all the way. You did a great job. You should be so proud of yourself. Like, it's very exciting. And it's not easy just to put all of your innermost stuff out into the world. It is vulnerable and nerve-wracking. You know, even the most steely, you know, hardened people, when they put what's inside, it's a whole different ballgame. So,
yeah. I think like one of the things that was exciting was, you know, when Max read the book for the first time, I had not let him read it. I had said, you know, I'd like to talk about you getting sober in our relationship. Is that okay? And he said yes.
Mm-hmm.
But I waited until the book was sent to Simon & Schuster Legal, and I had it was in the legal department, and then I was like, okay, you can read it, because, you know, I can't go back and change anything, because like, they're already approving this. And he said to me, after reading it, like, there's so much internally that was going on with you that I had no idea. And I was here living it with you. And to really understand, even though, you know, you were following me around and talking at me, you know, all this time, I didn't really understand the depth of sort of what ultimately, like, losing your job and this sort of new identity and new purpose in your life was about. And so I think, you know, that he's like, I was there, but I didn't really understand until I read the book. And that made me really happy, because I was like, oh, you know, he gets this, you know.
Well, congratulations, Tess. I'm so excited for you. I'll be watching and cheering, and
I'll be seeing you on the 4th.
Amazing.
4th of April. We're going to be there.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you. That's it. Easy peasy.
You're so welcome. Thank you. By the way, thanks for reading.
Of course.
I'm so honored to be here and have read the book. So thank you so much.
Oh my gosh. Of course. Okay. Bye, Tess.
Okay, bye.
Thank you for listening to Totally Booked with Zibby, formerly Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. If you loved the show, tell a friend, leave a review, follow me on Instagram @ZibbyOwens, and spread the word. Thanks so much. Oh, and buy the books.